Good morning, boys and girls. This video is for Tuesday, April 14th, 2020, and we're going to start by reading The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Okay. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and they lived with their mothers in a sandbox underneath the roof of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit, "one morning you may go into the fields or down the lane, but you don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather berries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight into Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the this is pictures to read, so I'm going to guess that this is among the grass, and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not unfortunately ran into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large mushrooms on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly birds, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. If you can get out of that net. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop under the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a pail. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter squeezed. Kerchoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his shoe upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that pail. After a time, he began to wonder about, going lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mice was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some fish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a rake. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon the wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and behind him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight path behind some black currant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the birds. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him till he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. A fortnight means 14 days, like 2 weeks. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime, but Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and cider and berries for supper. The end. Okay, so he did not follow his mom's advice and got himself into trouble. That's the moral of that story. So today for reading, you're going to read another book about some animals. This one is about some mice, and it's a folk tale, an old Native American folk tale. And so in social studies right now, if we were in school, we would be learning about folk tales from different cultures. So for reading this week, I want you to read The Mice Beat the Men. It's assigned to you in Reading A to Z. You just go to Reading My Assignments and you'll see that there. It's called The Mice Beat the Men, and today you're just going to listen to it. Okay? And remember, lots of different cultures have different folk tales that tell you different things that tell you the stories that were passed along to their children, and their children passed it on to their children inside of that culture. So maybe if anybody wants to share any stories that have been passed along to you and your family, then that would be a good discussion for us to have. I would like to hear some of those. Now for science, we've been learning about properties, okay? So for properties, here's our anchor chart, okay? Today we're going to focus on shape, okay? We're going to focus on shape, okay? So shape, some of the ones that we already have are triangle, circle, hexagon, square, cube, octagon, trapezoid, and rectangle. And you know what? I think it was Jessica, and I'm so sorry. One of you had sent me a message about something you wanted to add to the anchor chart, and I started this video and forgot to go and get it, but I promise you it'll be on tomorrow, okay? So I'll go ahead and I'll add it, and then we'll talk about what that is tomorrow. But for today, what I want you to do for shape is I want you to go on a scavenger hunt in your house for as many items as you can find that are the same shape. You can pick any of these shapes or any of the shapes that we haven't thought of already, okay? So just think of what shape it's probably easiest to think of what shape you want to find first, okay? So think, I'm gonna find things that are like a triangle, and then go find things that are like a triangle. Okay, and then if you find out that you don't really have that many things that are like a triangle, then you can change your shape, okay? But I want you to pick a shape and then find as many things in your house that are that shape, draw them and put a label on them, and then write a sentence just like you did last week saying these 3 or however many things you have are the same shape. They are all a triangle. Okay, so that's what I want you to do for shape. And there's an example in the plans that I sent as far as the sentence that I want you to write. Okay, so for math, we've been learning about time. So last week you did time to the hour. So all of your time, everything looked like this with the big hand up at the 12. Okay, everything looked like that. Today, we're going to start learning how to tell time if it's not exactly 5 o'clock. See, this is 5 o'clock, right? Because the shorthand is at the 5, and we know that if the longhand is up at the 12, then that says o'clock. Now we're going to talk about if the longhand is at the 6, okay? Those are the 2 things that we learn about in first grade, is if the longhand is at the 12 and if the longhand is at the 6. I put an anchor chart on Class Dojo and Facebook last week that showed you that if it's at the 12, we say o'clock. We always read the shorthand first, right? So the shorthand says 5, and then what do we do with this big minute hand? If it's up at the 12, we say o'clock. If it's down at the 6, we say 30. So we're going to read the shorthand first, and it's pointing past the 5, okay? It's pointing past the 5. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, it's pointing past the 4. This is actually, I went backwards. I didn't realize I went backwards. So you're going to, I'm looking at it backwards. So let's think about your birthday, okay? You turn 1 year old, and then you have some time in between when you're 1 and you're 2, okay? But all this time, you're still 1, okay? Whatever your parents ask, or whenever people ask your parents how old you were, they would always say 1, right? They wouldn't say 2 yet because you haven't been 2. But your birthday was maybe a few months ago. But there's some time in between, You are not 2 yet until your birthday, okay? So then when you turn 2, you get a little bit older and you get a little bit older, but you're still not 3. You're not 3 right here, right? You have to wait until your birthday to turn 3 years old. So the same way as a clock, okay? So that it'll be at the hour hand, it'll be at 4, okay? It's at 4. It has not gotten to 5 yet, okay? So it's still at 4. We still read it as 4 because it has not gotten to 5 o'clock yet. So 4, and then when we see the minute hand down at the 6, we say 30, 4:30. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put some times on here, and I want you to see if you can tell me what times they are, okay? Can you tell me what time that is? Okay, so we read the shorthand first. It is at 6 because it hasn't gotten to 7 yet, so it's still 6:30 because the minute hand is on the 6, okay? What about here? Okay, so if you said 7:30, you are right. It is past the minute that we read the shorthand first, right? And the hour hand is the shorthand, and it is past the 7, but it has not gotten to 8 yet. So it's 7, the minute hand is at the 6:30, 7:30, okay? Can you tell me what time it is here? Okay, it is 9:30. The hour hand is just past the 9, and the minute hand is at the 6, which means we say 30, okay? 9:30. So you're going to practice that today in your Math and Vision book in Vision Volume 2, pages 731 and 732, okay? And that is all that I have for you today. You guys have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.